Hi, everyone. It's Dapper Dan Gavazin here on Thursday night after the release of Amazing Spider Man Volume 6, number 13, in the Patreon, joined by two of my friends to talk about Spider Man comics. This is one of our, I intend at least to be bi weekly episodes of listener discussion and feedback from whoever can join me at whatever random time I decide to post these things. And I'd like to make it more uniform, but alas, life has kind of come at me the way that it has, and I'm just responding to it as I see fit. I literally put my son down 2 minutes before I hopped in here, so I'm doing the best that I can given the circumstances that I'm in. The insane thing is, I probably shouldn't have even introduced this new feature given the state of my life that it is right now, but. What are you gonna do? This is how I dapper. So anyway, we are here in the Patreon listener discussion to get some light feedback from you, the listeners and supporters. Who I want to say thank you again to for supporting our show. It does mean a lot, and I hope that these little things can go a long way to making you feel um, uh, the accurate amount of grateful that I am to yours for your support. So today we are here to do the dirty business of talking about Amazing Spider-Man Volume 6, Number 13, written by Zeb Wells, with art from the general crew. We got John Romita Jr., Scott Hanna, Marcio Menez, Joe Caramagna, and the editorial staff and everybody that puts these books together as per usual. So, like I said, I am Dapper Dan Gavazin. If you are here and you don't know who I am, boy, how'd you get into our Patreon? But I am joined by two of my friends, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves. So let's go from left to right.
Hi, my name is Matt. I go by Mr. Comics 89. You can find me anywhere on Instagram, Twitter, um, YouTube, all under the same name. So I have a complete run of Amazing Spider-Man, and I'm 4 issues away from getting all the annuals. So I'm almost there.
All right. Oh, saving the best for last.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm Cole, calling from Houston. Uh, Probably don't want to find me anywhere, but pleasure to be here, I guess.
Matt, I actually got to ask you. You're
hmm
on Twitter, and Cole, you're on Twitter too, right?
Yes, yeah, though more of a
And
lurker than anything.
yeah, that's totally fine. I mean, this is kind of a more general question than anything related to the issue, but like, boy, I'm really wrestling with the like my presence on Twitter. Like every 10 minutes, I am kind of facing the reality that that platform is crumbling before our eyes, and as someone who look, I don't have a big following on Twitter, but it's sizable enough that I feel like I can engage with Spider-Man Twitter in some ways, or at least to kind of beat back the crowd of trolls that operate there, and maybe offer some sunlight to people who are enjoying Spider-Man
hmm
comics these days. Heaven forbid. Um, and we've had a ton of new members join our Slack uh, because I've kind of put it out there that like, hey, this is a non-toxic place to talk about Spider-Man, but there is somewhat of a loss seeming to happen here. Like I'm followers are like purging from my account. I'm guessing just from people leaving Twitter. Um, it does feel weird to kind of lose that cultural space. Um, so rapidly here. The cachet, and now we've got even just today Elon saying that like the company might go bankrupt, and maybe we're losing it, or maybe this is the climax of Twitter, and he will be in there for a hot second before more normalizing forces come in. I don't know. Do you guys have any thoughts on like your experience with Twitter and maybe how it relates to the Spider-Man
Well,
fandom?
I can't speak for Cole, but I barely get into it myself. I mean, I am YouTube and Instagram, and that's where I thrive. I mean, I get less and less into Facebook nowadays. It seems like, but I'm still around. I struggle to tweet. I'm not very good at that self marketing thing to get myself out there to tweet a lot. I'm more of like Cole, a observer in a sense, you know. So it's like I'm almost watching the house burn down on Twitter, going, well, if Twitter collapses, they're just gonna recreate another Twitter 2 platform, and this time, no, you're not allowed to buy us, kind of a thing.
Yeah, right. Cole, are you sitting back? Are you getting the marshmallows out? I mean, what's your take? What's your feeling about all this?
I mean, it is enjoyable to watch in a way, just like how much fun people are having with it, burning down around them. But
Yeah.
yeah, it does. I think you're right though. It does feel like something is being lost, just because as horrible as it can be, especially like the comic book side of things on Twitter, there are some like it is like nice to have this space where you can kind of get a sense of where at least the terminally online people are on like the issues of the day. Uh, yeah, and I think that aspect of it at least I'll miss.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's weird. I don't like. Matt, I hope there's like a Twitter 2.0 just because I don't know what that looks like. It's certainly not Facebook. It's funny because all these people are talking about Mastodon as its replacement for it,
Mm-hmm.
and I know we're going way off topic here, but it is. I do think the like the cultural reaction to Spider-Man comics, and including the one we're talking about today, like is very largely like dominated on Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
We got Dan Slott who like lives on Twitter. Like maybe it's a net positive that we'll have a Spider-Man creator that can hit deadlines more regularly because he's not on Twitter. But it has kind of replaced the letters column in many ways in terms of like the ability to interact with these creators. And I just don't see any other platform offering that. I mean, people don't go back and forth on Instagram in comments, and YouTube is really the realm of video essays, not really like back and forth witticism or updates on the process of comic making. I mean, I've learned so much about making comics and engaging in comics culture just by hanging out on Twitter and finding voices I never would have heard of, or I met half of the people that I know who support me or follow my work through Twitter, um, and it's just weird to watch it evaporate. So
Mm.
anyway, I just kind of wanted to talk about that because there's not really a place for me to
Yeah.
discuss that on the show. I don't think. And Mark and I have very different, uses of Twitter, and maybe we could talk about it. But yeah, there's something interesting going on there. So anyway, redirecting. I apologize for the tangent, but I hope it was somewhat interesting. So Amazing Spider-Man Volume 6, number 13. This is the I dare say conclusion of the Hobgoblin story, although it feels, much more to me like how the Hobgoblin was handled in the 80s than how we've seen most modern story arcs in Spider-Man be handled today, which is to say a smattering of it seems like this is just part one
This is the
of,
first chapter.
yeah, exactly. I say that now, but then I think back to the Spencer run, and that was all like various parts of chapters of things. Um, but in that this is Hobgoblin, it really takes me back to like how that character was handled from Stern and DeFalco, and kind of having him be an ever present presence in a story. So anyway, I'm talking too much now. What did you guys think of this run, this story, this three parter, and its conclusion? We'll start with Matt, and then we'll go to Cole.
I actually enjoyed it. I mean, I guess it kind of reminded me a bit of like the Spider-Man animated series when Hobgoblin was so much more prevalent than Green Goblin because he appeared later in the series. So it reminded me a lot of the animated TV show, and I really enjoyed the fight and the interaction with them. I mean, the artwork for the most part was good. I found the artwork this time a bit lacking. I mean, I was disappointed in the artwork this time a little bit. I mean, I'll go into that a little bit later, different, but it's just I enjoyed the story. It was something familiar, I guess, or like it reminded me of the '80s in a sense, when Spider-Man was at its absolute peak. Back then in the '80s, just it was really good. I mean, I look forward to seeing where the story goes from here in the next chapter.
Well, very nice. Thank you, Matt. Cole, how about yourself?
Yeah, so I guess to echo both of what you guys were saying, like it does feel very much like a classic, like Stern, uh, Hobgoblin story here, where we're getting just a nice solid like arc that doesn't actually like complete, I guess, anybody's story here, and you get a nice continuation of what came before, but also a pretty clear direction for where we can go next, I think. Um, and it's not like anything earth shattering happening here, but it is just nice, solid Spider-Man comics that I would love to come back to, like month after month,
Mm.
basically.
Well, it's funny because I think we like look back on the Stern run like very fondly, and I love that run. And there's a few like earth shattering comics in that. I think, or maybe things that have been elevated as such just by their sheer quality. Like nothing can stop the Juggernaut is not thematically breaking new ground for Spider-Man or twisting the story in any kind of way that's entirely unique. It's just a really well told yarn. And, so much of Stern's run is just like, hey, this is like really solid Spider Man writing with, like, I think, like the Hobgoblin, punctuating it as like a solid new villain. Um, maybe it's a downgrade for the Hobgoblin here that he's just kind of in a solid Spider-Man story instead of a like blockbuster kind of like earth-shattering role that's punctuating a run. But I think at this point it makes sense that the character is not so elevated. So yeah, I mean, I think that read is very much in line with mine, where I'm like, first of all, I'm hyped. It's the Hobgoblin because it's me, and I love the Hobgoblin. Um, but in terms of the story, I've thought this is like exactly what I want from a Spider-Man comic, which is actually really high praise because so many other writers have shown that that is difficult to do. A well told, solid Spider-Man story. Cole, does that sound like it? Like what you're saying here?
Oh, absolutely. And I think this was actually the you said something with the first Hobgoblin like issue from this arc where this feels like the right story for the right time.
Yes.
So I think in line with like being the kind of Spider-Man comics that we want, it is also like the people crafting this story know why they're doing this story right now, and it flows all the better because of it.
So let's talk about this kind of like because this is really the reveal
Mm-hmm.
issue, right? I mean, like more than anything else, like yes, you've got this really like knockdown, drag out fight, and dramatically, it's kind of like if this ends up being like an early climax of this like first year or first 2 years of this run, I think it's really well placed because you've got we've seen Norman tempted to break bad all this time, and that like his own creation of sorts would be what does it. Motivated by the ultimate reveal that the Queen Goblin, Norman's own sins reflected back on him, is kind of orchestrating this whole thing. How did you guys feel about that reveal? Like how it was handled, and ultimately, like, does it excite you going forward? Matt, why don't you start us off
Well, the
here?
excitement kind of wasn't there because the cover of 11 was that swear that's her holding the mask, and so you're like,
Yeah,
that's kind of a thing.
well,
But um, I guess it was a bigger surprise to me that Roderick was brainwashed as well as Ned was, and so I was like, interesting. I thought Roderick doesn't seem the kind of person to be a puppet. So that was kind of surprising that he was having his strings pulled as well, and that he was unwittingly involved. So, but I mean, it was really good. I liked it for the most part. It's like other than surprise, surprise. Not really that. The Queen Goblin is back, but other than that, I liked it a lot. It was very good. Kept me a little bit surprised. Well, at the same time, I mean, kept was good. Hold on, I lost my thought. It kept me a little bit surprised, which kept me really into the story because it's like, what's coming next? So
great. Cole?
Oh yeah, and I don't think the Queen Goblin reveal was necessarily a surprise, given like all of the clues, basically, including the kind of early reveal cover we got with issue 11.
It's such an unfortunate thing. I
Yeah.
think like robbing that final moment of just the page turn surprise of it all. I mean, yes, there's the hand on the previous page that's quite obvious, but like it's such like a self goal in that instance. Anyway, go ahead, Cole.
Oh yeah, but even though I think these all three issues, I was just sort of waiting for Queen Goblin to show up. Uh, I would rather have a well told mystery where I can kind of see like the result from the first issue than something that is impossible to predict because like there weren't any clues really, and it was all red herrings and like nothing really makes sense whenever you come to the end. This ends up coming together like as a story, even if it wasn't necessarily like a surprise mystery.
Yeah, the motivations make sense. For the most part, given that you're on board magical shotguns, allowing the powers to be transferred to other people, which, it's comics, so like get on board. Um, but and there's still some things I think that need to be kind of like revealed, and I do hope that well, I mean, I think we're bound to revisit this, but I hope that like, as an editorial team and writing team, they don't consider this, you know, case closed. We still don't really know what is going on with Betty and her like having whoever in the bedroom with her. Like, I don't know if we're still meant to assume if that was Queen Goblin or Ned. Like if it's Ned in a hobgoblin costume, then why hide it in that way? Matt mentioned like how did Roderick get like roped into all of this? And why feel the need to pull a double Winkler device where someone who's being controlled by the Winkler device is controlling someone else with the Winkler device? Um, it just seems like it's like what it's twist on top of twist, and like as fun as that is to read, I want to understand I hope that there's a logic behind it all, and that we just don't like yada yada past this. And I'm willing to accept it for now because the story doesn't seem to be over, but I have all these lingering questions, that kind of keep me from like, aha, I understand it all now. Um, and maybe it was too much to hope that we would get all that in this issue because it's a lot for this thing to to tackle, and it might not be the appropriate time to tackle it. But yeah, so I don't know. Do you guys have any reactions to that? Did you feel similarly?
Cool.
I think. Oh yeah, sorry. I was going to say that like one similar worry I have, I think, is that there was a lot of setup for a series that I'm very excited for, the Gold Goblin from I think Chris Cantwell.
Yeah, it is Chris Cantwell.
Yeah, and I mean, he has been hit or miss, but I think this is the kind of story that he's well suited for.
Yeah,
and I've been excited for the things I've seen coming from that so far. But that's an editorial choice that has been emblematic of a trend, I think, that we've seen over the past few years where we get a pretty well told setup story in this main ASM book that then gets resolved somewhere else. And not only, I think that definitely hurts the main book because like we're leaving these dangling threads for the audience that they have to go somewhere else to figure out what's going on there. But also, I think it's hard not to lose something in the handoff between writers like that. In the most glaring example being, I think that Amazing Mary Jane series that came out a few years ago.
That series remains entirely baffling to me. that there like it seemed like storytelling by way of that like telephone game where someone would say something and it would be slowly transformed person by person into something completely different, and except this was like a direct handoff that was misconstrued, which is like, hey, MJ's going to get taken out of town by Kindred and his allies. And then the story was not at all interested in that idea. I was very confused. Um, at least what I from what I agree with you from what I've seen of the Gold Goblin stuff, it seems like it is going to at least be in the realm of what we're dealing with here. And to me, Dark Web is kind of like the 400-pound gorilla in the room. It's like, uh, and I've said this on Twitter, and Nick Lowe even liked my tweet about it, which was surprising to me. Which was like, I am so not excited for Dark Web. Like, I can't think of a Spider-Man event that I've been less excited for, just because I don't understand why this story needs to be told right now. It feels like an event that Marvel had a retreat and was like, you need to have an event. It has to cross over with X-Men, you know, and it worked backwards from that rather than because right now we're very squarely focused on the Norman Osborn of it all. And maybe, because I know Gold Goblin ties into that, maybe Norman Osborn will be, in there. We can walk and chew gum at the same time. But I just don't really care about Chasm right now. I want to resolve this thing with Peter and Norman right now. And then you got the Goblin Queen, and I don't know the first thing about Madeline Pryor. The fact that I know that she and the Goblin Queen are the same person, I consider myself worthy of a medal for that. But so anyway, it makes me very nervous, and especially if it means that this Norman thing is going to be handled largely the last thing I want with so tied into this Norman story is for the climax or character thing to happen in another book, even though I'm buying all these books.
Yeah.
That's the thing. We're all going to buy these books, and yet there's still, as you described it, some kind of loss in the handoff, and that's so hard to quantify. But
Yeah,
it is there, and you're right. It is emblematic. Go ahead. Go ahead.
oh yeah, I was gonna say that I think in this particular case, what worries and I guess just worries me is that I'm really interested in what Zeb Wells has to say about this. Um, and as much as I also want to hear from Chris Cantwell, in the Gold Goblin series, if they resolve really anything about Norman's story over there, I feel like we'll have missed something from Wells on that take, basically.
Yeah, it is weird because he does all this work to set it up. If someone else is going to conclude it, yeah, yeah. So, what do you guys think of the Let's talk about, I guess, the big third pillar of this story here is the Norman Osborn of it all. I mean, we've got the will he, won't he, is he good, is he not? At what will be his breaking point? Um, I think in another era, Mark and I would have bashed this issue. I could see someone holding my review of Dan Slott comics against me for this issue because of all of my complaints about someone else coming in and saving Spider-Man at the last second. Whereas I felt like that was something Dan Slott returned to a number of times. It seems like Wells' thing is let's have Spider-Man get the pulp beat out of him, and this is just the furthest it's ever gone, and so Norman felt compelled to finally come in. Do you guys think it was earned here, given that we've been to So I apologize for this one. Wells has gone to this well before. Was it still enough? Two hobgoblins to make you feel okay, it felt like truly it was time for Norman to break bad, so if you will, in this issue. So we'll start with Matt, and then we'll go to Cole. Your feelings?
I don't
on
think
this.
it was quite earned, I guess, because it does seem to me that he had other issues that seemed like he would need more help, like the very first arc, whatever, when he was really being beaten by um, Tombstone. There you go.
Tombstone.
But I guess he didn't have the suit then to be watched. But it just seemed like, I mean, at first I had a problem with how Norman was going a little bit too far, but then until I realized, oh wait, he's sin free, but he's not personality free, so he can go a little bit too far in beating him up. I just I understand him wanting to help Peter, and again wanting to continue to be on the right path, to make up for his sins or to be the better person. I can see this. I can see the struggle, and a quote unquote, because I live part of that thing myself. One of my biggest problems is my anger, so I can see myself struggling with things too. I make great progress one day and 10 steps back the next. So I can definitely see myself a little bit in Norman and trying to keep from going into my darker half at times. But at the same time, in the story, it's almost like he appeared when he. It didn't seem quite believable. I understand two hobgoblins with the powers having a little bit of a struggle, but it just seemed to me like they were purposely wiping the floor with Spider-Man, and that he wouldn't have that much trouble with them. I mean, have trouble, but not be tossed around like a sack of potatoes. It just seemed like they were purposely beating him up way aggressively, and then here's your hero. So yeah, it didn't feel quite earned. I mean, I was entertained enough in the moment, but just it didn't feel quite earned. It just felt like they were trying to fit something there that needed to be worked out slightly different.
Is it that you felt like it was kind of manufactured, like you could feel the writer's strings being pulled in there? Is that what you're getting at?
And part of the artwork, this issue felt just a little bit rushed in a sense. Maybe like in the writing, as well as the artwork. I mean, some of the panels are reminded me of Steve Ditko's artwork, where it's literally just the figures and one solid color in the background. It's like, I'm not used to this kind of graphics. I'm used to slightly more detail, kind of a thing. It seemed like in the artwork, and so it just seemed like I was being constantly thrown just a little bit. That I had to constantly refocus my attention to get the story, because things are just not quite clicking on all fronts.
Well, John Romita Jr., when I asked him on our show to describe his style, I'll never forget his answer, which was, it's Deadline style. And you might be right here. This is a further examination of Deadline style. Some of those things are characteristic of John Romita Jr.'s modern style, which is like he drops the detail as characters become smaller in the frame. And I can see that it's not to everybody's liking. And I agree with you. I do think the art on this one felt more rushed than it had in the previous two issues. I think there was some kind of distorted stuff that, if I'm going to pick on Nick Dragata for issue 10 and some of his distorted faces, it only seems fair that I think kind of more in line with a cohesive style for John Romita Jr. It is fair to say I don't think this is peak John Romita Jr. Operating in this title. Cole, get your feelings about Norman and even about the art if you have them.
Yeah, I mean, I have to agree with everything both of you just said on there, on the art and on Norman's thing, but it is just so exciting to me that Peter is going to supposedly be the one to push Norman off the edge, that it's I just can't help not be excited for that, because that is such a great new way to explore the great power, great responsibility dynamic that we always have in this book, and obviously similar things I think have been people have tried to do similar things before. I'm reminded of the Jackpot storyline in during Brand New Day, but it's just such a good well to go to that I'm really, really excited for where this is now very clearly going, assuming, of course, that it gets to stay in the main ASM book. like we talked about.
Yeah. I mean, I actually really like the Norman thing. I think we may, maybe I tip my hat a little too hard in my opinion, which is I think we've kind of hit this drum or beat this whatever graphic imagery I can conjure up using words, given that I'm talking about Peter getting beaten to a pulp. Um, I think if we didn't just have a high flying vulture story where Peter was torn to pieces, this would feel much more novel um, in this issue. But the comparison is really apt, which is to say, like, Vulture was a threat solved by a suit with all its gadgets, and two hobgoblins is a threat that even the suit can't handle. For me, the failure in the storytelling here is illustrating that the suit couldn't handle it. I don't feel like we saw Peter try to really utilize every part of the suit. I liked the kind of like stuff with Bug going haywire and getting destroyed. I would have loved to see him utilize the bombs and things like that. Just to see him like empty his arsenal and have it still come up short enough that Norman truly felt like he needed to step in with the suit. Like, because the other nice thing about it is the Gold Goblin is intended for Peter to use, and Norman assumes that, and I think that's a brilliant stroke of storytelling. But it's like, it's the kind of like upgrade that we truly needed to see, that the other suit was not up to the task, and I don't feel like the storytelling illustrated that 100%, and so the need for Norman to step in did not feel immediate enough, as much as I wanted it to, even if I ultimately buy that beat, in the end. Matt, you had something you wanted to say. I'm sorry,
well,
I'm talking.
Well, I just wanted to probably raise my hand because I said, partly threw me there too is right there at the end. Peter's mask was destroyed. He was maskless for half the show or half the issue, and both hobgoblins are not like, wait, who are you? I see your face. I think I know you. It's like no one knew. It's like his mask was never not destroyed. And if they made something of that of the story, like, let's look at, your mask is destroyed. Let's look at the eyes of my enemy so I can find you later. And then they're blindsided by Norman attacking them. That could be that. I could totally believe that, because then they're so occupied in the face of my enemy, and then boom. Then, because that would make total sense. But his mask destroyed, lying down on the ground, and they're still like acting a role, like they didn't recognize he's not maskless. So that didn't quite. That stuck in my mind. The whole rest of the issue was like, he doesn't have a mask on. He's being exposed. He has his two enemies, or one enemy as a hobgoblin, even though there's two, and they're not making a deal of it. It was totally like the pink elephant in the room tap dancing. It was.
I mean, if I'm gonna no prize it, which I want to do, although the editors and writing team don't need my defense, like, I still saw it as like Ned and Roderick being under the spell of whoever was controlling them, because like they don't react because they immediately go to killing Peter as a way to trigger Norman into action, right? They immediately take their gliders and try to plunge it into his chest, because their goal isn't rational, it is programmatic. So that will be my sense. No prize. But I do think it's a little bit on the page. I don't know, Cole, do you find yourself somewhere between us on this?
I think so. Like I was also somewhat. I sort of felt adrift a bit, I think, at that point in the story where it was certainly was very sudden, where we went from Peter, I think in the previous issue, handling Roderick pretty well, to suddenly just can't handle this at all. And I think you're right, Dan, that like seeing him put up a fight of some sort, like especially using the suit a little more, would have bridged that gap pretty well, I think. Um, but I guess in the context, like you mentioned, in the context of the larger run, this just escalating like series of threats that we're seeing Peter face um, is, I think, sealing the deal enough for me that I want to see this work, like you mentioned, Dan. And I think that actually says something about what um, maybe thematically Wells and JRJR are going for, where it's just this works well enough like as an overarching story that we can, I don't know, I guess I can forgive some of the sins of like this individual issue.
Yeah, I mean, look, if we went back through Spider-Man's history, even in our favorite stories, not every beat is going to hit perfectly, but we often just remember the kind of impression it left on us. It's the whole like shower stabbing scene in Psycho. You never see the knife go into the woman's chest, but you feel it and imagine it. Here that you're feeling the water boiling, and in this issue it boiled over, and that worked for me, even if the immediate beats of it, like, I think could have been stronger reinforced. And that's, I think, like, also gets to like why I'm so excited to find out about like what Peter did, because like if it is worthy of this kind of treatment, um, in terms of the storytelling style, um, I could see it really like redeeming so much of the run and leaving a really strong impression. And I think that oftentimes matters more than um, the kind of immediate stuff, especially the way that Wells has been handling it, which is to say, not making it a crucial factor in every story. Um, so we'll see. We'll see. Did you have any thoughts on the artwork? I know you speak eloquently about art. I'd love to hear, Cole, your thoughts, given that Matt expressed his feelings on the art.
Yeah, I think I would say the only thing I would add here is I was a little frustrated with. I'm not exactly sure who would be responsible here, but some people were talking about this on the Slack as well, that like there were some inconsistencies dealing with Roderick and Ned, like on the page, and like who was who and the state of each other's costumes. Um, that sometimes it was like a coloring issue, and so I'm not sure if that was Menyes making a mistake or if there was some miscommunication there.
Well, I just wanted to
And other
note that
times,
Menyes never colored their cowls yellow, and that's a
mm,
mistake, because we all know Hobgoblin is yellow. No,
yes,
sorry. Go ahead, Cole.
no, you're good. I think, oh, and the main thing I was actually mentioning there was like we saw, I think, Roderick's lenses come out. That might have been last issue.
Yeah.
Um, but then we like his eyes go back between red and white, and then at one point we see like Ned's lenses look white. And there's one moment where I think it's very clearly that like Roderick is supposed to be giving Ned a command, but the way the speech bubbles are pointing, it's Ned giving Roderick a command, and then it's not clear at all who's picking up like Ned's glider to try to finish the job on Peter. And like these are things that I really only noticed on the reread, right? But it's also just I've come to expect like such professionalism from this art team that it is disappointing to see like those specific details got wrong.
The biggest problem I have with the artwork is when the lines weren't on the spider suit. Like, it would look like Ultimate Spider-Man before he had the lines, when he was just in the blue and the red solid ensemble, and it's like he's missing the webs, and that's what makes Spider-Man. Otherwise, he's just a pro wrestler, fully, all fancied up. He needed the webbing on his suit. That's the biggest problem. I could ignore the red sky or the orange sky at times, but when it got to the point where there's no webbing on the smaller details, it was like, no, give me the webbing.
Yeah, it's funny because I like when JR does that. Like, I find it like an interesting characteristic of his art. This one had the weird factor that Spider-Man's wearing a helmet, which I don't think JR really truly like nailed ever in his artwork. Although I like it on the cover of this issue, the helmet feels like solid, and but like in the beginning of this issue, the helmet is all beaten up and has a big crack in the head, and so you had what appeared to be maybe webbing on the head, but what was actually just a crack in the helmet, and so like. I appreciated that after the fact narratively, because at first I was like, is this just weird inking? And then when it was like, oh no, his helmet is busted, I was like, oh, I get it. He was communicating that in the design, but it was unclear given his choice, to remove the webbing from the design. I think that's really going to come down to like individual taste, like whether or not you find that distracting or not, or it reminds you of the early spider suit from Ultimate Spider-Man, which is a nice shout out. But I do agree about the kind of action being a little bit jumbled. For me, I got a little lost in the kind of close-up images were very crowded, and I expect like a lot more from JRJR in terms of like coherent storytelling. So like, I chose to accept it as like, what is it like to fight two people at once? It would just be fists coming at you from every direction, and you not being able to coherently gauge that. It's one of those things with the spider sense too. It's like sometimes Spider-Man is able to handle Matrix style, because of the spider sense, and other times, like at the end of the previous issue, there's a surprise attack from behind that overwhelms his spider sense. So, whatever. But I did find it, like you guys said, like a little bit incoherent in regards to kind of ferreting out the like details of it all. All right, well, let's go to ratings from you guys. I'm curious, like where you place this, and maybe even like where does this story fit amongst the mini stories that we've gotten so far from you guys, or from this Wells run. So Matt, if you had to give it a grade, which again you don't have to do, we can New York Times it or whatever. But I'm also curious, like where you place this one in the ongoing Wells oeuvre.
Well, this particular issue fell just a little bit shorter, and out of the last three issues, the second one was definitely my favorite. Like I said, the art felt rushed. The story and the fighting wasn't totally convincing. Like I said, especially since he was holding his own in the last issue, and then just because it's a second person, now he's a punching bag. So I think I would have to give this a very low B minus. I don't want to go to C plus territory. I'm not there, and also partly because in the back of this issue in the what letters page, I have for the first time got a letter published. So,
oh, hey, that's cool! Congratulations.
thank you. So it's like so sentimentally, this is an A plus to me. but yeah, I'd definitely say a B minus. Like I said, it's not bad enough to consider it C territory or lower, but definitely the artwork left enough issues for me that I couldn't give it the usual B plus A territory. It just wasn't there. I had enough problems with it. I could be critical this time. So.
Okay, well, sentiment aside, where does this story fit for you in regards to the Wells run? Is it in your top 3 of what we've gotten so far? It's weird to say that given we've only had 12 issues or whatever, but
yeah, I would probably say top 3-ish. I mean, the first arc was definitely my favorite, and I forget which one was the next one, but yeah, it's definitely right up there, because like I said, Hobgoblins was definitely, like I said, a blast from the past, remind me of the animated series and all that stuff, and the great Hobgoblin stories I remember from yesteryear, so it was definitely good, but it's just this particular issue was just the pill they had to swallow, almost, in a sense. It kept things from being great. It left it good. I'll put it that way.
Well, in the history of Spider-Man reveals, It's not exactly like a winner's
Mhm.
row. So anyway, Cole, how about you? Where do you land on this thing?
So I think like as an individual issue, this is still pretty solid B plus territory. Like I still can't like complain too much whenever this issue, like most of the run, is just delivering on so many of like the fundamentals that I want to see from a Spider-Man comic. Um, but in the context of the entire run, um, I think it's like it sits higher than any non JRJR issue, but it is probably both this issue and this arc are probably the lowest of the JRJR stuff we've seen. But I think that actually says more about those that Tombstone and
Mhm.
Vulture arc than it really does about this one, because like the reveal at the end of the Tombstone arc, and then just the I cannot get over how much I loved
Oh
the Vulture
yes.
fight that we saw. Um, those were I mean those were two um, of some of the best issues we've had in years.
Yeah.
Right, and that this one was only very good to me. Like, uh, yeah, like I said, it says a lot more about them than it does about this issue.
I'll take it. You're right. Like this would have been an oasis in the middle of a desert in many other periods of recent Spider-Man comics. So I feel like we're just kind of getting bouncing from riches to riches here, which isn't a sentiment shared on Twitter. But you know what? Bringing it full circle, maybe Twitter won't be around for much longer. So whatever to that. Uh, well, thanks again, Matt and Cole, for joining me here. This was a lot of fun, and I hope to keep doing these. Trying to find the right time to do it, but I'm glad you two were able to join me on such short notice today. And this was a fun discussion, and I'm looking forward to talking to you once we get deep into dark web and all of that stuff. I am anxious. I don't. Maybe in a good way. I don't know, but we'll see. So anyway, the kind of takeaway, big takeaway is thank you one for joining me. Thank you for supporting what Mark and I do, and thank you to everybody listening at home for supporting us as well. I hope you enjoyed this conversation and that you consider joining us for one in the future. So with that, I say good night to everybody and have a great rest of your week.
See you later.